listening to The Writing Life, interviewing real writers about making a living from their words.
Hi, we are The Writing Life. I'm Ines and I'm here with Kitty.
Hi.
And today we have Monica Guerrasio, who is an Italian writer who is currently doing the Creative Writing Masters at Lancaster University.
Hi guys. So if you'd like to read some of your stuff for us.
Of course. So the extract that I'm going to read is from a novelette that I'm working on at the moment. It's a dystopian sci-fi with hints of fantasy story, and this is basically we're jumping into the scene where the main character is just looking at the city from the top. From the top, Regan could see a grey maze of concrete, streets and buildings. The whole city was unfolding in front of her. As per usual, she stared at the streets below and wondered how would it be like to jump from that height. Impossible. Suicide do not exist in the new society. Would she even feel pain once she hit the pavement? Would people be shaken by the sight or simply annoyed by the nuisance her flesh and guts would be? The latter seemed much more likely. Regan harvested no suicidal thought, but she rationally knew it was the only way out. If you were ever faced with a real cage and death, always pick at death, kiddo. That's what her mother taught her. The exercise guy called her name and she snapped out of the reverie, got herself in line, put the hood on and threw herself in yet another mindless routine. Going back to the rhythmic nail-licking was almost like going back home. After the hour of sweating and grunting, her hair was down from the shower and the water drops were running down her spine, causing a cold and annoying shiver against her warm skin. It was difficult to focus on the video, especially when noticing when nothing happened. She shook her head and slapped her cheeks. Most of the shift was over when a message popped on her screen. Cubital red letters read, "Authorized remote connection." Regan clicked on it and the file transfer started. It was odd to have a file arriving towards the end of the day. It was even more unusual there was no manager to supervise the transfer. A thought started rising in her head. Impossible, there are no free and independent thoughts in the new society. You should have not done that, kiddo. Regan's suspicious something was amiss was confirmed when the file finished transferring and sat in the right corner of the screen. "Watch me," as title. Was that a test? Of course it is. Was she supposed to open it? Of course not. What if she saw something she wasn't supposed to? Although it would have been even more suspicious if she didn't open a document that had been directly transferred to her station. Now you're just making excuses for yourself. With a tremulous finger, Regan clicked on the icon on the screen. Her fingertip rested there, dubious, curious. Don't be freaking stupid, kiddo. Regan exhaled and dragged the file to the basket. She was so tired she only wanted to go home and sleep the following morning. She was lost in reveries about pillows and blankets before she realized a gloved hand was resting on her shoulder. A security team was lining up at their station. They were going through her stuff on the desk. When did she get up from the chair? Start looking into the bag. The book was in the encouraged list. The team leader was directing questions at her, but she had trouble focusing. Her brain was sleep-deprived. Confusion is a sign of guilt. A smile is a sign of guilt. Happiness is a sign of guilt. Books are a sign of guilt. She wanted to throw up. Throwing up is a sign of guilt. Remember, Regan, if they put you in a cage, could you please follow us, Miss Stonewall? The man was holding her purse. She nodded and went after them. She didn't even ask a question. Asking questions is a sign of guilt. They walked her out of the office and went from the 10th floor to the 9th basement. Impossible. Basements do not exist. You're going crazy, Regan. Crazy like Grandma Ross. When the lift opened, Regan saw a grey corridor with doors on each side. Her escort led the way to the room behind door number 6. When she entered, white neon lights illuminated the small space. The mirror on both walls reflected the light and created a visual illusion. Regan's silhouette was repeated over and over and over again in an endless succession of herself inside herself, left and right. The leader of the security team invited her to sit and told her someone would be with her soon. Then he left Regan to her speculations and doubts. You should have not accepted that file, kiddo. She was pretty sure someone was observing her and her reaction. Fingers twisting doesn't exist in the new society. She kept reading to herself. She kept repeating to herself she had been dumb and forgot the first rule of the game: follow the rules. She should have not accepted the connection. She should have notified the supervisor. She should have not put the file in the basket. Regan didn't know how long she had been in the white room, but was fairly sure her shift was over by now. She longed for her favorite part of the day, when she would get on the bus and read for the whole trip back home. She wanted to cry. Impossible. Tears do not exist in the new society. No one is sad. Tears are a sign of guilt. Time. Impossible. Time doesn't exist. Went by so slowly, and when finally the door opened and someone entered the room, Regan was a shattered pile of nerves and thoughts.
Fantastic.
Thank you
very much. So now we'll jump straight to the questions. So you're currently doing a creative writing MA at Lancaster University. What encouraged you to do that?
I always wanted to write. I started when I was 9 years old, and I always thought that I was supposed to do that on the side while, doing a proper job that would pay bills and stuff. But after I realized that a career wasn't making me happy and I didn't have enough time to write, that's when I decided to, go back to study and do that full time.
Is this the first time in this master's that you are showing your work to others?
The whole concept of the master is that every week we submit extracts or parts of our work, and then my fellow writers look at it with the tutor as well, of course, and then every week at the workshop we sit down and critique each other's work. So by now I'm actually kind of got used to it.
But this is the first time you do that, like you show your writing to a range of strangers at the beginning, I guess.
I published a book when I was in Italy, so I'm not sure if that classifies as showing the...
Well, yeah.
Okay, then yes. Okay.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, but I guess that's the first time that I actually have such an intimate experience with other writers. So because when we critique each other's work and we talk about our own works, there is this process that starts that, we can inspire each other. At least that's how I feel about it.
So it's improved your writing, you'd say, already in the short time you've been doing it, or helped you to think more about the way you are writing?
Yes, that's the second specifically. I'm not sure if my writing has improved. I'd like to think so. There is now like a tiny editor in the back of my mind that I can never switch off. So whenever there is something, I realize much quicker what's wrong or how can I, get around things and improve them.
And do you always follow the advice of your peers? Or do you think that there is useful advice, non-useful advice? How you distinguish?
There are some advices that are very useful and that really make me think. Some other advices that I tend to discard straight away, mainly because I present extracts of my work, then the other writers do not have a general idea of the work of the novel I'm working on. So some of their advices might not have places in exact moment because there are questions that will be answered later on in the book. What I try to do, I usually tend to let the feedback rest overnight, and then I go over the following morning, and then I make a note to myself, like, consider this for this chapter, consider this for the future. And then at the moment I'm just collecting feedback. During Christmas holidays I'll just go over them and apply to the different parts of the novel so far.
And was it the first time you were giving critiques of other people's work, or had you done something like that before?
I used to write for different music magazines in London, and I was reviewing a lot of music. I also reviewed movies and literature, so I was very much in a critiquing frame of mind back then. I must say that it's been a lot more difficult than I thought it would have been going back to that frame of mind. I think because I spent so much time away from writing and reading in a specific way, that kind of lost the habit. But little by little I go back, and it gets easier and easier.
Yeah, well, doing reviews is a lot of writers' dreams. How did you get into doing that?
Oh, by all means, I wasn't paid. I did this postgraduate diploma course in London at the London School of Journalism, and they usually, like even during the course, but specifically after I graduated, they send us some offers out from ex-alumni or whoever else, and I grabbed on a couple of them. And then, of course, the more you write and the more you get your name up there, the easier it gets for other magazines. Like it was specific only online magazines, but it was easier for the editors to get in touch with me. I also worked interned for about 3 months for a music PR agency. So there were editors that knew who I was working for. So it was once you get into that kind of industry, it's kind of easy to just get in touch with artist agencies and other magazines. So yeah, it was really fun, but again, it was for free. So I did it mainly for the experience and for the fun and for going to concerts for free, which is quite good.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah.
And now that you are doing the MA, do you think that creative writing can be an academic discipline or not?
I think so, and it's not just because I'm doing the MA. It's just also I've been writing for a fairly long time. I always thought, back in my early 20s, I always thought about that the writer's block, the blank page syndrome actually existed. But now I actually think that it's more about how you plan your novel. So of course you need to have big ideas. And if you don't have big ideas, not even big ideas, sorry, you need to have good ideas. And you have to have the stamina to to research, to put yourself and your writing through trials and see if you get somewhere. So if you don't have a good idea, you probably won't go anywhere. But other than that, once you have the idea, everything that comes afterwards, it's all about reading, studying, researching, confronting yourself with other writers. And I think the MA is a great place to do that, because you're in an intimate, safe environment, but at the same time you're confronting yourself with your peers, and nothing counts more than that.
And speaking of writer's block, do you feel like the Masters has helped you to structure a writing routine with the deadlines? Does it help you, or do you sometimes find them intimidating that you have to produce weekly submissions?
Because I had about a corpus of 60,000 words when I started, the first few weeks have been quite easy for me, because I mainly had to go back and add it and restructure it. But now that I'm actually a good part through the first term, most of my good stuff is gone. It's been submitted. So now I'm writing from scratch, also because I'm reinventing the novel, and so I think from now on I'll be mainly faced with writing new bits. So now it's getting a little bit scary, but because I think I'm quite a prolific writer, meaning that once I have an idea, I tackle it relentlessly, then I think it's gonna be fine.
And do you have any kind of writing routine? Like, do you always write more or less in the same hours?
Usually I try to write in the afternoon and study in the morning, like read in the morning, mainly because in the afternoon after lunch I start feeling a little bit drowsy. So if I start reading, I'll fall asleep. Yeah. But if I start writing, then I'll be so into it. Then at some point I'll just go, like the napping time will be over and I'll still be writing. Although my favorite time of writing is probably at night. So from after dinner up until 11 o'clock, midnight, I feel it refreshing, weirdly.
Wow. So you're an Italian writer, but obviously you're doing this master's course in English. Have you found any challenges with that, or were you already writing in English beforehand?
I've been writing in English pretty much since I moved in London. So we're talking about nearly 4 years ago now. Because I did the postgraduate diploma as well, my English was tested 3 years ago during the course. And my tutor, who was also an editor, was mean in the best possible way. So I think my grammar has come a long way since then. I don't find it particularly difficult. I think now that I've been here for so long, I kind of got into it. When I go back to Italy, I usually write in Italian. When I'm here, I usually write in English. I think that's just because when I'm here, I don't hear anyone speaking Italian, and vice versa when I'm there. So,
Is there one you prefer? One that you feel you can express your ideas through?
That's odd, because sometimes I'm looking for the perfect word in English and I have the perfect word in Italian, and then I'm looking for the perfect word in Italian and then I think, oh, there is that perfect word in English. So it's either the one or the other. I don't prefer neither of them, and I prefer both of them, meaning that I think it really changes depending on what I'm writing and how I'm feeling. So they have very specific roles and different roles. So, yeah.
So you mentioned you have already published a book in Italy.
I have.
So how did that happen?
Okay. I was with a literary agency, a small one, in my hometown. And my agent followed, I do remember, because it happened about 8 years ago now.
Okay.
But I think she was either contacted by the publishing house, or she got in touch with the publishing house. She submitted the portfolio of us writers, and the publishing house picked me and then another writer. And then I think a year after that, I was published. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
What's the type of experience then? You were quite young.
Yeah, well, it was quite tricky because the publisher house disappeared.
Oh,
so yes, so the books were published. They were in the bookshops and they were sold. We started with 3,000 copies. I don't know exactly how many were sold, but I remember we went on I presented the books in different locations, and it was actually really fun. But it didn't last long because the publishing house never get back at us in terms of payment or marketing strategies, and so it was basically just a hit and miss kind of thing.
Wow.
Were you writing in a specific genre then?
Yes, I am a fantasy writer. So my first novel was a fantasy novel. The novel that I'm working on for the MA is the first chapter of a trilogy. Again, fantasy. The extract that I read, it's from a dystopian with touch of fantasies novelette, which I'm thinking I'm gonna expand in an anthology, so that there's gonna be different short stories in the same universe. There will be the first novelette of 20,000 words, and then short stories that you can read either in a succession or you can just pick and mix basically. But yeah, I definitely have a genre.
So who are your biggest influences? What other writers do you feel inspired by?
Okay, my very first influence, which wasn't my biggest, was this student in medicine faculty in Italy. Her name is Guerrasio, and I read her book, which she published when she was in her early 20s. And it was called, I'll translate straight from Italian. So it's called Evelyn, the Hidden Goddess. And I read it. It was 700 pages. And I read it over a period of 5 days. Because I would wake up 6 a.m, read it, go to school. I wouldn't actually follow the class. I would just keep reading, go back home, read it. So there was a week where I didn't do anything else but just read that book.
Wow.
And the imagery and the plot line and the stories, I can barely remember it, but I remember they moved me so much back then, and that's what prompted me to write the very first draft of the novel that then I published.
Wow.
But in terms of more recent influences, I would definitely mention Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, Terry Pratchett. more like a writer that admires and I love, but not like an influence. And then there are like Italian fiction writers like Italo Calvino, and he's more of a magic realism rather than fantasy. And then although he's considered probably the only Italian fantasy writer. And then Italo Svevo as well. I based my bachelor dissertation on him, and so yeah.
So why do you think there's only one big fantasy writer in Italy?
I don't know. Okay, fantasy is quite big. It's become quite big recently in Italy, and mainly, I think after the first Lord of the Ring movie. Yes, and then once you reach the market, you create a wave basically. There are definitely other Italian fantasy writers, don't get me wrong. I even read some of them. But Italo Calvino combines fantasy with certain literary, and Italian writers and readers can be quite snobbish in a way. So Italo Calvino had that breakthrough the snobbish fog of Italian readership. I think. Let's hope no one will be offended by what I'm saying.
So are there any elements of your Italian heritage that come through in your writing? Do you mix Italian culture into your work in any way?
More than Italian culture, I think I mix Italian phrasings, which I translate from Italian into English. And then I have people saying, this is not quite right in English, but I like the way it sounds. And that's when I realized that that's when I'm translating Italian into English. The thing is that with my heritage is not made specifically by Italian culture. Because growing up I read a lot of comic books, start with Japanese manga, and then moved on to English and American graphic novel. Then I think that my background is very mixed, and I also studied languages during high school. So I've studied English, French, and Spanish. So I think all these different bits and bobs come out in my background. I never thought about a specific Italianness that can come out in my writing. Probably because it's fantasy, so it's I think it's a genre that transcends any nationality. Probably because the main exponent was British. So.
And do you find any difference between writing for an Italian audience and writing now for a British audience?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
There are two completely different audiences. And to be fair, and this is the first time when I was doing my journalism course, because Italian and English journalism are completely different. English tend to be more stark, I want to say, whether Italian tend to be more lavish in terms of language and luxurious. And I was talking about it with a Portuguese friend, and I was complaining about Italian articles being said, why are they repeating the concept over and over and over again? And my friend said, because now you're used to how things work in the English media, which is completely different from how journalism works in Italy and sometimes Spain and sometimes France. So I think there might be the same difference in terms of a readership when it comes to novels. The Italian prose can be quite heavy, where English prose can be more fluid and it's not harsher prose. It's just it has a different weight.
So you decided to write in English just because you were living in UK, basically, or just because you wanted to reach an English-speaking audience?
A little bit of both. Definitely, mainly the first one, meaning that if I decided to go somewhere else, I doubt I would be writing in English. I think I would be either writing in the language of the country I would be in, or keep writing in Italian. But because before moving here, I was reading English books, I was watching English movies without subtitles in original language, then I think my brain got used to it even before I moved here. And so when I arrived to London, when I arrived about 3 years ago, it was really easy to make the switch completely. So, but I think, to be fair, one of the reasons why I moved to England and studied journalism and now creative writing here is because when you write in English, you reach a wider readership that you wouldn't be able to reach if you were writing in Italian.
So now you've moved to Lancaster, how are you finding the literary life here? Is it different from other places you've lived in?
It's very different because, to be fair, in London my daily routine was exhausting. I would be up in the morning around 5 o'clock and go back to sleep around 9:30 because I would work very early. So there wasn't really much time for me to cultivate a literary life. When I was back home, there were actually quite a few events happening. You just need to look for them, but agencies and small societies would organize them often. Of course, now that I'm here in Lancaster and I'm a university and, I have all the newsletters coming through my email, it becomes a lot easier to keep track of everything. This is like, I like this, oh no, I want to go to this one. So, it's very easy. I think having the university and such a strong creative writing and program and of English faculty, I think helps in, having so many events in that sense.
And have you ever considered translating, for example, your English writing to Italian or vice versa?
Oh, definitely. I will definitely do that. I have some Italian things that I will translate in English. And I think once I will be done with my novel, I'll definitely, work all over it in Italian. The thing is that I'm really bad at rewriting stuff because whenever I rewrite, I inevitably change. So I really need to make an effort and keep focused on what I'm translating without adding or taking anything away.
You don't find it challenging because every time I try to translate some Spanish into English, I can't, it drives me crazy, maybe it's just me, but I find it so difficult to maintain the voice, the rhythm, all these little things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do understand what you mean. It's completely different. When I think about rewriting, I think mainly about plot line. So I would never think to rewrite what I wrote in Italian into English. I would just think, okay, I know the story has this many twists and so many characters, and roughly this is the dialogues, and then I will write it new in English. I don't know if they make sense.
So it wouldn't be like, it wouldn't be like giving your text to a translator, the professional translator, and saying, I want this in Italian.
Yeah, but I speak Italian. I would feel really guilty not translating my own works because I would feel like I'm actually giving up on my language. Whenever there is a process of translation, and this is coming from someone who doesn't know anything about translation, you can never translate literally. You have to adapt. So if I know enough about my language and about my work, I think, I'll just basically write the same story in another language. I won't be translating it. I will be just taking everything, taking it apart, and then putting it up together in another language. So if you go and compare the text, they will be different. But bottom line, I'm just telling the same story in a different language.
So now the big question.
Okay.
After the MA, do you hope to make a living from your writing?
I hope, yes. Do I think it will happen? Definitely not.
Oh, no.
No, what I'm saying is that I'm honestly, when I started this course, I started knowing I had no clue what would happen next September. So I'm considering starting a PhD. I'm considering, moving to Edinburgh for a year and then applying for a PhD. Considering going back to London for a year and then applying for a PhD. I'm considering applying for jobs in a publishing house, in an agency. Considering so many things, my brain is going to explode at some point, definitely. But definitely, that is the main goal in life. It doesn't matter if it happens in September, next September, in a year time or in 10, it will happen at some point.
Fantastic.
And the spirit.
Well, it's been wonderful talking to you, and
Likewise.
a wonderfully interesting conversation. I've taken a lot away from it, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You have been listening to The Writing Live. Now we want to thank to Teresa, our editor, and Yvonne, the creator of the show.